Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima and I'm here checking out Neurovoider. This is a twin-stick roguelike, not unlike, say, Nuclear Throne. I have played this for about 3 hours so far and I can show you that. Notably, this is also a game I played a fair bit more of because it came out on the Switch and I did a video of it when it did then, so I've got a fair bit more than 3 hours in it. There's my stats for you, so yeah, almost 3 hours here. And, well, that's pretty much it, really. Something worth noting, though, this is only single player. There is no co-op of any kind in this version of the game, despite the fact that the Switch version and I believe the PS4 and Xbox One versions all have 4-player co-op, so you're only getting the single player here. Here's all your settings, replay the tutorial, display your runtime, and change your language. Nothing too out of the ordinary outside of that and your volume sliders, so let's go hop into it, shall we? So we've got a few difficulty levels. I've been playing mainly on Rogue. And you can also do a custom seed, not too much out of the ordinary there. And we can just pop into the player slot and break free. There's a couple of things you get to pick. You get to pick your build, which is the thing that determines your special ability. You do also get to pick a secondary ability, or a skill as they call it. And these can be either passive or active things. Personally, I like going for the one that spawns all of your equipment as your class, because your different classes can actually have different pieces of equipment. However, just for the fun of it, we're going to go unstable for this video because it actually changes it on every floor. So you'll get to see a little bit of the variety going on when we change floors. So the game's pretty simple. 20 levels. You got to get through them all, more or less. Kill everything that's there, destroy all the generators. And you can choose what area you go to, and sometimes this is a good thing, sometimes it isn't really, because sometimes you'll just be left with some really bad choices, is what I'm trying to say. So we can go for a small arena that has a fair few elites and lots of loot. We can go for a huge one that has next to none, or we can go for something in between that has a bit of a weird balance of each. We'll go play a small level first, just so that we can try and get through all the different kinds of levels, but most of the levels aren't particularly different. I mean, they might have one or two different kinds of environmental things you can play around with, but other than that, most of them follow the same basic pattern. It's a maze. A maze of explosive barrels, equipment chests, and enemies. All of which you're free to kill at your leisure. So this game is pretty simple to understand. It is a twin-stick roguelike. Everything's procedurally generated, so you've got enemies in different places, you've got item boxes and stuff in different places, and you have your robot, which starts out with the same loadout every time, but can get different weapons and loadouts via the usage of loot drops. However, you can't do that in the middle of the fight. You have to wait until the end of the level, at which point you can then apply new equipment. The controls are very simple. You have the left stick to move and the right stick to aim, and you can shoot using both shoulder buttons. Both your shoulder buttons can correspond to a unique weapon. And this is a very simple system. You do also have the ability to hold down circle for a map, and I believe it's the... must be a button that I'm not entirely aware of, but there is also your special ability for your class and your skill. Now, I've already used my skill once. It looks like it's the speed up skill, which lets you just like get a bit of an extra speed boost for a little bit. You can refill your bar, as you can see in the top left there, by collecting the things that the enemies drop when they're destroyed. There's a reactor, by the way. The reactors are the main goal of each stage. You destroy all of them and you can teleport out at will, which means you don't have to fight through the entirety of a world if you have to, but you probably will have to anyway, just because of the way the levels are generated. So yeah, as I was saying, you do have those two abilities, and you want to know what you have to do? You have to use the rear touchpad. Boy. Not particularly great in my opinion. I mean, I'm playing this on a slim Vita right now, and not my traditional red fat workhorse, because this is actually a European copy of the game, and I don't like wiping my red fat one's account, just because if I wanted to wipe that one, I'd be doing it forever. And since I don't have the rear touchpad on the back at anywhere near the size I do on my regular Vita, it means that I'm actually doing okay in terms of... not accidentally slipping and hitting a button on the rear touchpad just because of that. With that said though, I can see why it would be extremely annoying to play the game and have your finger immediately slip, because some of these abilities can really screw you over if you throw them out at the wrong time. Like, my Rampage, for example, which is the class that I've been working with here. The Rampage, if you tap the right half of the rear touchpad, it fires out all your guns at an accelerated rate, but it also drains your EP a lot faster. Your EP is your weapon energy, and if your weapon energy runs out, you won't be able to fire again while it recharges. So if you just have that really bad luck of your finger slipping at exactly the wrong time and just firing out a bunch of firepower that you didn't intend to fire off in the first place, well, you've probably just gone and overheated yourself right in front of a dude, and that sucks. You do also have the ability to tap the left side of the screen for whatever your skill is. And personally, I haven't been playing too much with that side of things, because as I said, I've mainly been going with the passive skill that gets me armor and weaponry of my class all the time, as we're about to see here. But yeah, it can be kind of annoying. I would hope for the option to swap to another, I'd hope for the option to swap to another control scheme, but it's not here, which kind of sucks. So here's your equipment screen. You can see all the equipment that you've picked up throughout the level. You can scrap pieces that you don't need for extra money. You also use money to not only upgrade your parts that you find, but to repair yourself. So you really want to be careful just how much damage you've been taking, because if you end up in a position where you just get absolutely destroyed, if you get absolutely destroyed, you might not have any money to repair yourself, which would really suck. Loot is sorted by 4 rarities. Actually 5, but the 5th one doesn't come up very often, I apologize. And generally you want to be sticking to the gold rarity as much as possible, but you also want to be swapping out your weaponry as much as possible. Mainly because the overall stats of the weaponry and the armor and stuff like that all tends to accelerate alongside the game's progression. So you'll probably want to be swapping to new paths just to keep up on the stat boosting, although if you boost your own gear a couple of times, it'll stay up to date for at least a little bit. Not a massive amount of time, but you'll get a couple of floors out of it before you really need to consider swapping. You've got a bunch of stats. You've got your general EP and HP that you can upgrade, and you've also got your special abilities, which can affect certain things like how fast you move, how fast you recover from overheat, and all of that. Nothing particularly massive. It's all pretty simple to understand. You can also forge new items, and hopefully you get something really cool. Like the rail gatling, for example, isn't actually too bad, but it sucks up fire. It sucks up energy like a mofo, so I think I want to be careful about using that. So if we hold the square button while we're here, we can ready up, and we can move on to the next thing. You do have a Metaverse option here, which will actually let you skip a level. Bad idea, though. Mainly because the Metaverse levels are really damn hard. Like, the only ones I've managed to survive are really, really easy ones that only had elites that would come at me when I wanted them to, so I was able to just stay back, relax, and beat the crap out of them, more or less. So, what do we got this time? I have no idea what the ability is here. I'm gonna use it. I think that's EMP, which will basically just make every enemy shot evaporate out of the air. But yeah, this is basically it. It's more or less just wandering around and shooting the ever-loving bejesus out of everything that gets in your way. It is a very simple game. There are boss fights every 5 levels, but other than that, it's the same basic thing. Just go and wipe the floor with whatever you deem necessary, which is basically every enemy robot in the general facility. No real story, no notes or anything like that, which I'm actually a fan of, because I can't imagine playing a roguelike with, like, collectibles like that most of the time. It just annoys me to no end. Like, back when Rogue Legacy did the little story bits, which weren't bad in and of themselves, I just find them a little bit annoying to collect in a bloody roguelike, where it's random whether or not you'll actually find the damn things. But yeah, it's pretty simple. Just go to the next level, beat the crap out of everything you see, rinse and repeat. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. My only major gripe with it though, and I've said this about the Switch version as well, as far as I can tell, this is no different from the Switch version outside of having only one player. As far as I can tell, at least. But my major problem is, the game's generally repetitive. Now, I know I say repetitive, and I know I say that a lot, but in this game I feel it applies pretty fairly. Mainly because the game has not that much in the way of enemy variety. Like, there are enemies with different guns, and you can see some with different rarities, like that dude there, who are more likely to have, like, rarer loot and stuff like that. But in this case, they are basically the same thing, because I mean, sure, you can tell roughly what weapons an enemy's going to have if you pay really close attention to them. But outside of that, it feels like you're just coming across the same dudes, just sometimes they've got different weapons on them. So you do kind of have to just kind of take every level the same way, more or less. Just advance until you find a dude to shoot him, rinse, repeat. And it can get pretty samey after a while, especially if you're not doing particularly well, because this game is actually pretty hard. Like, you can see that I'm down to about a quarter of my health already, and I'm only on the second stage, which isn't particularly great for me. I have gotten further than this, and I did a surprise stream on Thursday, which I haven't actually put up on the channel yet, to show that I am actually pretty decent at this game, where I got like 3/4 of the way through the game. But a lot of my runs have been stopped by, like, the first few stages, just because it's kind of hard to get a decent set of weapons and armor, and it's notably difficult to just, you know, get a good run and get on a good clip where you feel like you actually stand a chance of living through what the game has to throw at you. So you'll be playing those first stages over and over a lot if your experience is anything like mine. And that can be a little bit disheartening, I can imagine, because the repetitiveness of the game in comparison would just make it feel rather disappointing, I guess the word would be, just because you have to fight so many things over and over again. And while that's not really a bad thing, and it does feel like you can win this game on skill alone, it is a fair bit of skill that I'm not entirely sure I'm a fan of. You see, the game's got a view distance problem, a lot like Hotline Miami, where sometimes you can't see dudes that are outside of your view. You do get a little bit of a warning, and I say a little bit with emphasis, because, sure, you get a little bit of warning, but it ain't much. You'll see, like, a little exclamation point, but once you see that exclamation point, the enemies can shoot you, and they will. So you end up in a situation where you'll end up in a situation where they'll see you, they'll shoot you, and the weapon they're going to shoot you with is fast enough that by the time you've seen and acknowledged that the exclamation point is there, you will get hit by whatever the bullet is they fired out. And on some levels, this is, well, it's not enough to kill you, but it's enough to put you in a really bad position. And if it happens more than once, you're kind of screwed. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass to deal with. It's not particularly difficult to deal with. I mean, you can just, like, more or less hang back. But when you end up in a situation like this, where you're immediately driven back from the very beginning because there's a bunch of dudes already at your spawn point, it can just get a little bit frustrating at times trying to deal with it. Thankfully, it looks like they've given me the ability that lets me recover 1/3 of my health, so I might as well just spend that now and see if I can actually use it later. The repetitiveness isn't really helped that much by the fact that the game is actually surprisingly long. Like, the run that I did that got me like 3/4 of the way through the game and didn't even finish was an hour and 15 minutes long. Now, it might be a bit slower than normal because I was, you know, talking to my viewers on the chat and all that, but it's still a pretty long game, even with all of that taken into consideration. So you might end up in a position where the game gets relatively repetitive really quickly and you don't want to continue on the run, which is something I admit happened to me every now and again. You can save and quit, as you can see via the option in the menu there, and come back later. I'm just saying that, well, you might want to do that. If you don't like games that take over an hour to complete like this, in terms of just, you know, roguelikeness, you might want to consider avoiding this one. With all of that said, though, I will admit that the moving and shooting is still pretty satisfying. Same thing I said about the Switch version. They got the actual movement, shooting, and dodging out of the way of enemy fire down, well, not so much down pat, but they still did a really good job with it, and it's still pretty satisfying to avoid the robot hordes and beat the crap out of everything you see. Sure, you take hits from time to time, but most of your characters are pretty well suited to tanking it. Everything except the dash character. Your three classes, I should say. Your three classes also have, like, really different abilities. Like, the ability to dash through gunfire, the ability to rampage a bunch of fire, and the ability to stop and lock down into an energy shield. These are all really valuable abilities, and they really change the way you play the game alongside with what skill you pick. So if you like a little bit of just variance on strategy there, you've got a lot to work with. And one of the game's trophies is actually beat the entire game without using the repair function in this menu here. Which I cannot imagine doing to save my life, but it's there if you want to do it. And for the amount of time that you play it while you're... The amount of time that you play it while you are working towards, you know, like actually winning or stuff like that, and the boredom or the repetitiveness isn't setting in, it's actually pretty good. I got nothing particularly wrong with it. I'd like the rear touchpad control style changed, but being that I'm playing on a Slim, and I'm guessing that's what they designed this around, it's not too bad of a control scheme, and I can't see much else working because being able to aim and move requires a third finger somewhere, and since both your guns are already taken up by the L and R buttons, it's not like they're going to have many other buttons available to actually make that work. So I can't guarantee that they would be able to patch this out if you absolutely hate your rear touchpad controls. What I'm saying is, I don't blame them. I just wish there could be another way. Because you need to have you basically need three hands to make it work in the, you know, the way the game currently works. And I don't expect them to rewrite the whole game just because they couldn't get it to fit on the Vita without using the rear touchpad. That would be silly. I'm just saying it's worthy of note. Let's talk about the presentation, shall we? So the game itself actually looks pretty good. Lots of effects. I like lots of effects, like all the different kinds of bullets and shit going out, all the fancy background tiling, the just general look of the entire game is actually really nice, and I do appreciate the look of it. It's a fairly nice looking game, and it actually runs pretty well. Like, it doesn't hit 60, I'm pretty sure this is 30. And it does drop from time to time, but it's not actually that big of a deal, because it still runs pretty well. I haven't noticed the frame rate hitching or anything like that that would indicate a bad port, which is actually kind of incredible considering this is a Unity game, to my knowledge. But the game does run perfectly fine for the most part, and I have no real issues with that side of things. What I am definitely more a fan of, though, is the soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack is taken almost entirely, I believe, from an album by the man Dan Terminus named The Wrath of Code. And some people might be hearing this soundtrack and thinking, this sounds a lot like Hotline Miami, and that's because it kind of is. I believe Dan Terminus has been in the Hotline Miami soundtrack at least once. And it's also worth noting that the title track of the album that the entire soundtrack of this game came from, which is The Wrath of Code, the title track of that actually had some cooperation. Whoops, I actually died, holy shit. Well, I'm gonna go again, unfortunately. Yeah, as you can see, it really is quite difficult. Let's just hit quick restart. But as I was saying, it is made by the title track of that album, The Wrath of Code, also called The Wrath of Code, was a cooperation with Perturbator, who actually showed up who has actually shown up several times in the Hotline Miami soundtrack. So there's a lot to love here. I actually love the soundtrack to this game, and it doesn't 100% fit, but it's still really cool music, and it still helps set the mood really well, so I'm not... like, good stuff. That's what I'll say. I'll say it's good stuff, I won't worry too much about it. Like, it's really just a minor nitpick that it doesn't 100% fit, and somebody else is probably going to think completely different to me, and you'd be more than welcome to. I can understand why you think that. And still, The Wrath of Code is really fucking good, so any excuse I have to listen to it is a good excuse indeed. Oh, Jesus, look at all those dudes. Alright, come on, come here. I've got to blow you all up at some point. There we go. Really not doing too well on the health already. So yeah, my major gripe with this game is repetitiveness, and if you aren't as susceptible as to repetitiveness like I am in games like this, you'll probably really like it. And I said the same thing on the Switch review, I think. I think the repetitiveness isn't as big a deal as it was back as when I played it on Switch. I'm not entirely sure why. I like to think I'm not unfairly biased towards the Vita, but you know, I'm not gonna say it's impossible that I'm not. I'm just gonna say that it feels a little bit different, and I don't know why. Maybe because my runs in this version haven't been as long. I've been having a lot shorter runs than I was previously. So that might be helping the repetitiveness not set in as fast. But yeah, other than that, the game is still pretty enjoyable. Like, I didn't really have a problem with it gameplay-wise back when it came out on Switch, and I don't have a problem with it now. It's still pretty fun to go and blast the crap out of a bunch of robots. Well, I repaired, but do I have any good stuff? I probably don't, knowing my luck. Well, yeah, I'm still on Rampage, so let's just go with the one that'll give me the most health. So apparently they've given me yet another mini nuke. I seem to be getting really good luck with mini nukes. What else have I got? Heat wave. That'll actually be a decent main weapon, and I'll put the nuke as my sub weapon. There we go. The nuke is very good for... Oh dear, I'm not doing the metaverse. Yeah, I'm not doing the metaverse. I did also remember saying something along the lines of, in my Switch version video, having a little bit more variety would be nice, and I still agree with that here, but I guess just settling into the gameplay side of things means that I feel like that, well, the game isn't really too bad without the, without things like bonus levels or anything like that outside the metaverse, which is so hard that I never really feel the want to actually try them. Right, no rampaging until I get a replacement for Mini Nuke, because it takes up so much of my energy. Like, it basically drains my energy in one shot. That's not great. Thankfully, I just got a purple rarity. Purple rarity is the rarity that everything is pre-made on, so I just got a really powerful weapon. That might actually help me last to a boss fight. I will try and get to a boss fight, because the boss fights in this game are where the difficulty really ratchets up. And they can actually be a pretty big pain in the ass to deal with, because they have this annoying tendency to be just such big difficulty spikes that it's actually really hard to get past them a lot of the time. Which sucks, but, you know, that's the roguelike thing. And generally, if you get, like, a good run going, you won't run into any problems with, like, you know, failing to deal with them. It's just sometimes you will. Alright, I've already completed the level, so I can get out of here. So let's go and see what that weapon I just got is, because hopefully it is something good. The End of Days. Well, that's replacing the mini nuke. Oh, and I should probably check my other stuff as well, but... as far as I'm aware, I didn't get the parts I need for my class, because... yeah, it's always kind of annoying how... the vision core and transport you need are specific to your class, so you do need to be picking up... you do need to be getting some good loot if you want to get more than like 1 or 2 pieces for your kind. And there's also the, what's it called? The passive skill that lets you pick up every item of your class. That's the one I've been using. It's very useful because you end up getting good parts really easily, but it also means you don't have your passive skill to fall back on. So, yeah, it can be annoying from time to time, I must say. The shtick on Frostbite is that you end up slipping on the ground, which makes no sense half the time, because half the time you don't even have a, half the time you don't even have, what's it called, legs to walk on. Like, sometimes you do, like I do now, but even if you're, like, on a hover tank or something, you'll still slip on the ground for no discernible reason. It's kind of silly. Oh well, at least you can get some money and actually craft parts for your class. So you don't need to worry too much about running into that sort of thing. You can just scrap everything and craft until you get something decent. Why can't all problems in life be solved by simply walking into a room, yelling the end of days, and blowing everything half to shit? Seems like it'd make our lives so much easier. So this level's going to be interesting because eventually I'm going to run across a nemesis, which is basically my ghost. And it should have the parts on it that I did when I died. However, it's going to probably wipe the floor with me if I don't end the days. If I don't the end of days it as soon as it walks into view. Because if I don't do that, I'm probably in trouble. Okay, apparently my special ability this time around is the thing that only affects swords, and I don't use swords in this game. I find swords to be kind of useless. I mean, sure, you can put it into your build if you want, but you would really need to prioritize your melee energy. And by melee energy, I mean your HP and your melee defense. Alright, I can leave the level anytime I like, and you know what? Let's just make this nice and quick. I'll go straight to the boss. Because we're already 32 minutes in, and this room is starting to heat up like crazy because I've got no airflow. So I need to get this done relatively quickly. Don't have anything in the way of anything worth taking, and my guns are already pretty well boosted. I do have plenty of guns, though. Is that the mini nuke? Yes, it is. I have no use for the mini nuke this time around. And I have no use for that either. That's way too much. That is way too much fucking energy for, way too much energy for something that is a one-shot pony and only hits everything around me. But anyway, let's show you what a boss looks like. Every time I've fought this boss, it's been the same dude. And the bosses can also be just upgraded versions of their previous forms. And these two can combine, so you can end up fighting the same boss 3 times, just it's a little bit tougher each time, which is surprisingly annoying. But I think it might actually be different this time. The Justice Trio. No, I'm not entirely sure what that's about either. Hellfire, everything. Just end of days, mother sludger, or... Right. Okay, yeah, these two down here. So I'll just end of days it as well. Well, it looks like I'd be better off just doing ye old cannon on it until it does. Screw it. Well, that's the downside of the end of the days by the sound of it. It's, at least the end of the days has, like, massive reach. Like, seriously. I don't think there's anything else in the game that has this sort of explosion radius. And the damage it puts out is pretty good as well. Like, I'm almost done here. Look at all those bullets you have to dodge. Thankfully, you don't have to dodge all of them, and you do get health kits from the forever spawning minions, but... Yeah, just be careful with how you go about it. You don't want to go blundering into other shots while you're focusing on trying to heal up from the first shot you took, but thankfully, we beat the ever-loving bejesus out of that boss. And we get all this stuff and we get to move on. I'm not going to move on because, as I said, I'm starting to run out of air in here, so I'm just going to teleport and we're just going to end it off on the intermission screen. So, to sum up how I feel about this game, it's pretty good. It's a little repetitive, and there's slight performance issues and control issues, but nothing that really gets in the way too much, at least by my experience, and it's still pretty good. If you're looking for something along these lines and Nuclear Throne has bored you, maybe this'll do the trick. Maybe it'll be right up your alley. So yeah, there you go. It's not that bad. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.